Hello folks, welcome to the next video in linear equations and inequalities, and in this one we're going to introduce the second half of the unit, which is the inequality stuff. So inequalities just means something that's not equal. So we're used to having set up an equation where you have something like 2x plus 3 equals 8. But in this unit, instead of 2x plus 3 equaling 8, we might say something like 2x plus 3 is greater than 8. And the idea is instead of having just one possible answer, we now have this whole range of answers. So for example, if I had something like this, parking, 30-minute parking, what does that mean? Well, it means that we're allowed to be parking up to 30 minutes, but we can't go over, right? So if you're parked for 15 minutes or 20 minutes or 29 minutes, that's fine as long as it's less than 13 or 30, sorry. So a couple of things we need to know, these symbols, less than versus greater than. That's kind of how we read them. So in this case, this is t is greater than 30. T is less than 30. And notice that two of these symbols has an equal sign underneath. What that means is, in this case, t is allowed to be 30, whereas in this one, t can't be 30. It has to be numbers that are bigger than 30. Right? So with these questions, instead of something like t equals 30, and then that's the answer is 30, we run into these scenarios where, well, t is not equal to 30. T can be any number that's less than 30, right? So 29, 28, 27, and so on and so on. Could be decimals, whole numbers. We can even go into negatives if they made sense for the context of the question. So this is the difference, is instead of an equal sign, we have one of these inequality symbols, okay? So what do these things mean? So speed limit, 55. What does that mean? It means that we're allowed to be less than or equal to 55. So I can drive 55 kilometers per hour when I'm on the road, but I could also drive 50 or 45, right? It's that I'm not allowed to go over, but I can be under, right? You must be at least 102 centimeters to go on a ride, which means that your height has to be greater than or equal to 102. Right? The store below 4 degrees, so temperature has to be less than or equal to 4, and then 14a means that you have to be over or equal to the age of 14, right? So these are just some examples of when we might want to use something like this, where instead of the answer being equal to 4 degrees or equal to 14 years old, the answer is it could be less than 4 degrees or more than 14 years old. Okay, so it's a good habit to get into, being able to write these things. So let's just take a look at a few of these. So contest entrants must be at least 18 years old. So just like with the last two sections, we have to be using a variable, right? And your variable can be whatever you want it to be. So in this case, maybe we'll do A for age, right? So the age is greater than or equal to 18. And again, I'm going to add this equal to piece because I want to make sure that an 18-year-old can be a part of my solution, okay? The temperature has been below minus 5 degrees Celsius all week. So T is less than -5. Now notice I didn't put the equals to because it says been below, not it got up to -5 or it's been -5 and less, but it's been below -5 all week long. So we're not going to put the equals to. You must have 7 items or less to use the express line checkout, right? So I is less than or equal to 7, right? Because you can have 7 items, but you can't have any more than that. And then finally, scientists have identified over 400 species of dinosaurs. So S is greater than 400 for the same reason, because it's over 400. It's not equals to 400. When we're trying to check these things, so if we think back to the last couple of sections, we were verifying our solutions by taking the numbers and plugging them into our equation to see if they worked. Well, the same thing can be done for these things, but instead of them being equal on either side, we just have to make sure that the inequality symbol is right. So B greater than or equal to -4. So what that means is if I take these numbers and I plug them in, -8 greater than or equal to -4, and -3.5 greater than or equal to -4, and -4 greater than or equal to -4, and -4.5 greater than or equal to -4, and then finally 0 greater than or equal to -4, right? We simply have to check the validity of the statement. Is it true? Yes or no, right? So is -8 greater than or equal to -4? No, right? And how do we check what that means to be greater than? Well, we can think about this as being on a number line, right? So if I have my number line here, right, here's 0, -1, 2, 3, -4 is there, right? What does it mean to be greater than? Well, when we're thinking about our number line, basically it means that anything to the right is greater than, and then anything that is to the left is less than. So if I'm thinking about -4, where is -8 on my number line? Well, -8 is over here, right? There it is there. So is -8 greater than -4 or is it less than -4? Well, in this case, because we're to the left of -4 on my number line, we are less than. -3.5 is right here, so that one is in fact greater than, so yes. -4 greater than or equal to -4. So this is where it's really important that we recognize that this has the equal sign. Because the equal sign is there, then this one works. -4 is in fact equal to -4, so we're good. -4.5, nope, that one doesn't work because again, that is to the left of -4. And then finally 0, yep, that one's good because it's to the right of -4. How do I graph these things? So this is something that we have to be getting used to because it's something we will be tested on. So if I have my number line, you can make your number line however you want. You don't have to start at 0. It's usually a good habit to start it at 0 because that's where a lot of things happen. But making sure that we can graph the number that we see. So in this case, I have -5. So I'm going to shift my number line a little bit to put the 0 kind of a bit more to the right so I can get all the way down to -5. Put a couple numbers on either side just to make sure that I can graph in either direction. Okay, t greater than -5. So -5 is the barrier. It acts as kind of the thing that separates my answers from my non-answers. And I know I want to go towards the numbers that are greater than -5, so that's to the right. So how do I graph this? Well, there are two options here. I can either use a closed circle or I can use an open circle. And the difference depends on the symbol I have here. Because when I use a closed circle, I'm saying that this number is an answer. And when I use an open circle, I'm saying this number is not an answer. So for a question like this, where its t is greater than -5, I'm going to use an open circle because -5 is not one of my answers. Then from that open circle, I'm going to draw an arrow that indicates the direction I want to go. So because we're greater than, I'm drawing my arrow to the right, right? So for this question, -2 greater than x, we generally want to read these things from the variable. So even though it's -2 greater than x, if I read that the other way around, I'd say x is less than or equal to -2, right? So we want to make sure that we're reading these things from the variable so we can really decide what direction to put our arrow. So 0, -1, -2, -3, -4, 1, 2, 3. So where is -2 on my number line? It's right here. And because in this case, -2 is an answer, I'm going to use a closed circle to say, yeah, -2 is one of my answers. And even though my symbol started as a greater than symbol, because the x is on the right, if we think about it backwards, it's actually x is less than -2. So that tells me to draw my arrow to the left. Okay, and then finally, if I had questions like these two where we had decimals or fractions, we just have to make sure that we can find those numbers on their number line. So -25/3, we may want to think about that as a proper fraction. So 25 can be divided by 3 8 times with 1 remaining. So this thing turns into -8 1/3. And 0.5 is right in between 0 and 1. So making sure that I can see these things on my number line is really important, and making sure that I'm reading them from the variable over. So 0.5 less than or equal to a can be rethought of as a greater than or equal to 0.5. So if I put these on my number line, so here's 0, 1, 2, and -1, -2, -3, -4, -5, -6, -7, -8, and I'll put one more here, -9. Right, where do I find 0.5? I find it right here in between. I see it has an equals to symbol, so I'm going to use my closed circle to indicate this thing is at 0.5. And because we're greater than, we're going to go off to the right. Same thing down here. We have p less than -8 1/3. So -8 and 1/3 is 1. If I split up the distance between -8 and -9, 1, 2, 3 steps, it happens right in the middle. And because, not middle, sorry, but the first one, and because there is no equals to symbol, I'm going to use my open circle, and the less than tells me that this arrow needs to go to the left. Okay? So just one more thing, when we're trying to match these things, making sure that we can match them up properly is really important based on the symbol. So again, if I have an arrow going to the right, that is greater than. If I have an arrow going to the left, that is less than. If I have a open circle, again, that is less than, or greater than, right? And if I have a closed circle, that's less than or equal to or greater than or equal to, because that's what those symbols mean. So when I'm looking through these inequalities, I want to read them again from the variable, right? So for G, for example, instead of reading this as 3 greater than or equal to H, we can flip it around and say H is less than or equal to 3, right? And then from there, we're simply just looking to match these symbols with what the arrow should look like. So for example, if this is a closed arrow or a closed circle and we're going to the right, that means I should have something that is greater than or equal to 3. So when I'm looking through my list here, oh, we see that that's E, so this has to be function E, right? Again, I have an open circle and I'm going to the left, so that is strictly less than 3. So again, as I'm looking through my equation here, I see, oh, that's this one here, so that's D, and so on and so on. Notice this one doesn't have an arrow. What does that mean? It means that there's only one answer, and that answer is 3. And then I could go through and I can match up exactly the same way. All right, so that is it for today's video, and I will see you all in the next one.